Well, good evening and welcome to Copperfield's Books virtual event with Peter Norwith. Neuwirth, I'm sorry. Thanks for bearing with us as well with the changes in schedule. We were hoping to be in person, but hopefully next release for Peter. So my name is Jamie Madsen and I'm the Marketing and Events Coordinator here at Copperfield's Books, and I'll also be your host for the evening. So just a couple of items to note before we get started. Go ahead and keep an eye on your chat box tonight. I will be using this to provide links to view tonight's title, discount codes, and links to view further Copperfield's events and just other goodies. So keep an eye out there. Additionally, the format will feature between 30 to 35 minutes of speaking and will then be followed by a live Q&A. So if you look at the bottom of your Zoom screen, you'll see an icon on the lower right that says Q&A. Please go ahead and submit your questions and comments there rather than replying to me in the chat box. And thank you for that. So I'm really thrilled to introduce tonight's local author, Peter Neuwirth. Peter currently holds a part-time position as a senior consulting actuary and spends most of his time writing essays and presentations on financial wellness. His recent writing centers around the principles of holistic financial wellness and how they can be used to weather the economic crises we face as a society and as individuals. Peter's work is well known in actuarial circles. He is a fellow of the Society of Actuaries and a fellow of the Conference of Consulting Actuaries, and he currently lives locally here in Santa Rosa. So he's with us tonight to discuss his newest title, Money Mountaineering. And I know many of you are excited to learn tonight. I am as well. So I'm going to hand it straight over to you, Peter. Why don't you take it away for us?
Well, thanks very much, Jamie, and thanks to everybody who's attending virtually. And like everybody, I truly had wished that this could have been an event in person, particularly since Copperfield's in Montgomery Village was my local bookstore until my place on at the base of Hood Mountain off of Los Alamos burned up last September. But my fire story is just one of 4,000 of them in this town, and each one is different, but that's part of why I love this town, because it's come together and has stayed together. And again, I'm really sorry I couldn't be here in person, that this is a virtual event instead. But as with so much these days, we're adapting. And adapting to, the unexpected, and the, what we thought was going to happen didn't happen, and that has been true more often in the world of money than ever. And for years and years and years, the world of money has surprised us and changed. And I'm going to tell you a story that is not in the book, that is sort of my introduction to the world of money and the uncertainty and unexpected nature of it. I started as an actuary back in 1979 with a life insurance company and worked there for a couple of years, and then decided to shift over to the consulting world. And I joined a firm called Hewitt Associates. And this was back in 1981. And in the fall of that year, the IRS put out some regulations on a new section of the IRS code. And it was a new part of Section 401, and it was Section K of 401. And you probably have heard of this section, because that was the law and the regulations that allowed 401k plans to come into existence. And I was a young actuarial student, and I'm sitting there in the listening to this, elder statesman, elder actuary talking about this new law that's going to be very, very exciting. It's going to allow employees to make contributions before tax and accumulate tremendous savings. And it was going to be the newest, greatest thing in retirement plans. And we're actuaries and we're doing actuarial valuations for traditional pension plans. And we're thinking, what is this new thing? And at some point in the presentation, this old actuary said, one of the best things about being an actuary and being in this world is that I don't know what I'm going to be consulting on 5 years from now. And you don't either. And there were a few stricken faces in the room, but for me, this was music to my ears, because I love the new, I love the different, and I love to solve problems, and I love looking at things mathematically. So for me, this was music to my ears. So at that point, I knew I wanted to be an actuary, and for the next 40 years, that's the world I inhabited. I have had very few days where I've regretted my choice of profession. And after about 4 decades in that profession, I decided to start to share some of what I had learned, because I thought that the actuarial perspective was a very, very useful one, and it had helped me in my financial life and in my work life and throughout my career to make better choices and to make better decisions. And so I started writing down, all the things that I thought were useful to know about being an actuary, and how an actuary thinks and how an actuary looks at things and how an actuary makes decisions. And I published a book towards the end of my career called "What's Your Future Worth?" I thought, okay, now everybody can make decisions in the same way actuaries do and navigate their way through life in a rational and effective way. And then what I realized, though, after talking about the book to audience after audience, was that not everybody wants to be an actuary. Not everybody loves the idea of math. Not everybody loves the idea of looking at things through an actuarial lens. And in fact, what people really want, what people really need to know for their lives is how to make better decisions around money. They're don't know what to do about money. And so I said to myself, well, I got to write another book. And fortunately, by that point, I was retired. And at that point, I had the time, and I just started writing every day. And because, in fact, the actuarial perspective is not only just as useful for money decisions as it is for life decisions, it's probably more designed or it was created. I mean, actuarial science was invented by those who needed to. It was actually invented by by a couple of gamblers, a couple of French mathematicians who were trying to win at the casino, and invented probability theory. And that's where actuarial science started, and that's where actuarial science lives today. And so I decided to write a new book. And that book is the book that we're talking about today. And I called it Money Mountaineering because, in fact, when I think about the world of money, I think about it as a dangerous and wild mountain wilderness. It is complex. It is so complex that it's almost impossible to understand. Very, very easy to get lost in. It's very, there's all kinds of terms and investments and derivatives and all sorts of things that people just don't understand. People have been trained to understand. Nobody can understand. It's not what they do in life. And it's worse than that. It's not only a complex and forest of trees that you don't know where you're at, but you don't know what's going to happen next. It's the weather. You don't know what the weather is going to be like. It's an uncertain environment. Storms can blow out of nowhere. Floods, forest fires can jump up at a minute's notice and wreck your life. So it's not just complex. It's not just uncertain, but it's also noisy. There's full of people running around the forest, running around the woods, telling you what to do with your money, telling you which way to go. And some of them know what they're talking about, but a lot of them don't. Not all of them. In fact, almost none of them know you. And they certainly don't have your best interests at heart. You've got to look long and hard before you can find someone who can both advise you and has your best interests at heart. So not only so again, it's complicated, it's uncertain, it's noisy, full of bad advice. But the worst things, or maybe not the worst things, but the last challenge that we all face is that we weren't built for it. We just weren't evolved to make financial decisions. We were evolved to escape saber-toothed tigers. We were not designed or built to choose between fixed and variable rate mortgages. So it's a tremendous set of challenges that we all face as we try to make our way through this wilderness. So that's why the book is called Money Mountaineering, because what I'm trying to do with this book is provide a trail map, some understanding of the terrain, some sense of where the dangers might lie, and give you a sense of how to be safe, how to find your way through this wilderness, how to find your way to a safe spot where you can pitch your tent and enjoy the rest of your life. So that's sort of what the book is about. Now I want to talk a little bit about how I wrote that book and what is in that book, because as an actuary, we love to solve problems, and we love to, particularly math problems or specific problems that have an answer and can be analyzed and worked on. But that's not what financial wellness is about, because it's far more intractable than that. It's and what do you do when you're faced with an intractable problem? Well, the first thing that I do, and the first thing that most actuaries do, is to take a step back and try to understand what it is you're faced with. What is the environment that you're in, and what it is that where you're trying to go, and figure out where it is, what's the best path to that destination is. So how do I help people? How can I help people do that? Well, I looked at it and I said, the first thing you have to do is recognize that everybody's different. everybody has their own financial situation. Everybody has their own families, dependents, level of income, level of assets, level of debt. But more than that, everybody has their own inner self. They have their own hopes, dreams, fears, and maybe even most important when it comes to financial decisions is they all have their own way of relating to the present and relating to the future. It's not just, should I plan ahead? It's how far ahead should I plan? How important is those years, 20 years from now compared to the present? How much chances do I want to take? What kind of risk do I want to take on to achieve what I want to achieve? So we are all completely different human beings, and so that, I guess, is my big issue and big problem with many of the books that are out there trying to advise people on how to deal with their money. I mean, the fact is, one size does not fit all. That books like, and it's not like I don't like people like Susie Orman, and I think she's a nice person and she has a lot of interesting things to say, but she doesn't know you. And the only person who really knows you is you. And so that's maybe where my book starts. It starts with the notion that you are the expert in your own financial world, and that only you can make the decisions that you're going to have to live with. I used to work with an actuary who's really good actuary, a guy named Charlie Commander. And he used to say, when he was talking about pension plans, if you've seen one pension plan, you've seen one pension plan. And that's the way I feel about financial plans. If you've seen one financial plan, you've seen one financial plan. And so what I tried to do with this book, and I hope you will check it out and actually read it before you read any of these other books that you may find useful. And you may find Susie Orman useful. You may find some of the others, Rick Edelman and some of the others useful. But first, you got to get to know yourself, and you got to get to know your own situation. And so what I've done in this book is to lay out 6 fundamental principles. And the very first is that you are unique, and your path is like no other path. And I'm going to read a section of the book, a little passage from the book that illustrates this, because when you look at the book, you'll see that I dedicated it to my father. And my father's a theoretical mathematician. He still is at age 87. And long before I learned how to look at the world of money through an actuary's eyes, I learned to look at the world in general through a mathematician's eyes. And so I grew up in a mathematician's household, and I grew up knowing and loving math and learning to see the world the way my father did. Now, it turns out my father and I have looked at the world of money pretty differently. So the passage I'm going to read is a passage at the very beginning of the book that illustrates this very first important principle. And what it also shows is how my father's view of money is a little different than mine. So with that, I think I'm just going to pull up the book and read a little bit. And this, by the way, is it's the very first page of the introduction. So if you get the book, you'll find it right away as soon as you page to page XVII. My 87-year-old father doesn't like debt, not one little bit. Growing up, he often told me, neither a borrower nor a lender be. And that is the way he has lived his life. He tried to pay cash for everything and made sure our family was never burdened with debt other than the house mortgage. Now, deep into retirement, he's doing just fine. He owns his house free and clear. His discipline and committed savings behavior throughout his career as a theoretical mathematician provided him a guaranteed lifetime annuity from TIAA-CREF, which, along with Social Security and Medicare, gives him and my mother a modest but reasonably comfortable and low-stress lifestyle. They don't travel much, but they have everything they need and much of what they want. They even have a bit of savings set aside in case of emergencies. In short, his retirement plan was just right for him. For many years leading up to his retirement and after, my father would ask my opinion on his financial decisions. As a pension actuary with access to all the theoretical knowledge there is about how one should plan for retirement, I gave him plenty of advice, almost none of which he took. But those conversations, along with hundreds of others I've had with colleagues, clients, and friends about their financial situations, were critical to the evolution of my ideas about how to manage one's financial life. Eventually, I concluded that most of the advice and conventional wisdom around retirement planning and financial wellness in general is not only often wrong, but more importantly, it is rarely fully applicable to a given individual's situation, even when it is correct. We are each too idiosyncratic in our circumstances, inclinations, and objectives for rules of thumb to work. Beyond that, almost all financial wellness principles are based on severe oversimplifications and overly compartmentalized views of critical financial decisions, whether they are as seemingly straightforward as how much should I put aside in my 401k, or as fraught and complicated like, do I have enough to retire next year? A few years ago, I started blogging about holistic financial wellness and how, without looking at the totality of our financial situations, that is, all of our assets and liabilities, including known future income and expenses, and hard to quantify assets like education, skills, and future earnings potential, along with our individual goals, plans, hopes, fears, and dreams, we will never make the right choices to attain the financial health we all seek. For a while, if you did a Google search on holistic financial wellness or holistic financial wealth, my blog posts, as well as a few of the actuarial presentations I've given on the subject, were at the top of the list. Now the field has become, and many others are using those terms. I'm sure that's a good thing because it is important for more brains and voices to enter the debate, as the result will undoubtedly be better answers and more insights. However, as I also worry that my voice is now getting lost in the noise. So as we get started, I want to talk about what I mean by holistic financial wellness and how I believe individuals, with some help, should think about it. For me, holistic financial wellness means ensuring financial wellness over a lifetime and doing so in a way that reflects your unique circumstances as well as your financial objectives, constraints, and values. When I say values, I mean both what is most important to you now and what you are willing to sacrifice today to enjoy benefits in the future, or provide protection against unforeseen circumstances that might arise. It is important to know how these trade-offs may differ depending on how far in the future you consider. In this book, our explorations of how to think about your money in that context will rely on 6 foundational principles. So this is an introduction and an explanation of the very first, and it's the one that you really need to embody and integrate into your thoughts before you can even move forward. And so I'll read it. Holistic financial wellness foundational principle number 1. Every person's values, objectives, and financial situation is unique and multidimensional. Therefore, make every financial decision consistent with who you are, considering the totality of your own specific financial picture. So that's number 1. I know we've got some, we don't have a lot of time today, and I want to leave time for questions and answers. So what I'm going to do in the remaining 10 or 15 minutes, I guess, is talk about the other 5 principles, what they are, and then I'm going to give you some practical advice. And I say advice advisedly, because I don't like to give advice. I don't give recommendations. I don't tell people what they should invest in or what they should do. Now, if I get to know you a little bit, or maybe even I get to know you a lot, I might tell you what I would do if I were in your shoes. And I'll certainly tell you what I've done in similar situations. And I'll tell you what I've done, and I'll tell you why I did it. One of my gurus, or one of the people one of my teachers is Nassim Taleb, and he advises. He says, never ask someone for what they would recommend for an investment, but ask them what they have in their portfolio. And so I try to take that same approach. I will tell you the way I see things. I will tell you what I've done, but you have to make the decisions for yourself. So what are the other principles? Well, the second principle is that debt is just as important as assets. So there's a tendency in our world to focus on how to invest your money. What should I do with my money? Where should I put my income? But you also have to consider as just as important what you owe. Not only what you owe, but what you will owe and what you might owe, what you might have to pay if something bad happens, what you will pay even if nothing bad happens. So it's almost a three-dimensional thing. You have to know not just your assets, but your liabilities and how those assets and liabilities manifest through time and into the future. So that's number 2. And, I have a lot in the book about, what that means. I have a lot in the book about what is money, what is debt, how did these things come about? So you'll learn about money and you'll learn about debt. And then hopefully you'll learn enough to know what to do with your money and your debt. Number 3 is perhaps the one that it's the one that got me the book contract, because what I say there is when you will need advice. Everybody needs help. We can't be experts on everything. But when you get advice, make sure that advice is given and that expertise is given by people who are working for you and are on your side, 100% if possible. But even if they're not 100% on your side, you want to know whose side they're on. You need to do your due diligence, and you need to know what you need and go get help from someone who knows what they're talking about. So that 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 advice is I guess the way I would put it is that you should think about getting financial help the way you think about hiring a lawyer. Why do you hire a lawyer? You hire a lawyer to get you out of trouble. You hire a lawyer to find out if you're in trouble. You hire a lawyer to help you with a transaction. You hire a lawyer to help evaluate a transaction. But every time you hire a lawyer, you know that lawyer is working for you. And you should deal with your money in the same way, I think. I mean, that's the principle that I advise and I believe in. So that's number 3. Number 4 is a hard one, because number 4 is a hard fact and truth that most people don't want to acknowledge and understand. And that is, you cannot predict the future. You cannot predict the future. It is impossible to predict the future. And if you needed more evidence for that, just look at what has happened to most of us in the last year and a half. Who knew this was coming? And the fact is, you can't predict it, but you can imagine it. And you can imagine the possibilities. You can imagine all the ways the future might manifest. And so that's really what principle number 4 is about, is go through life with some curiosity and some open-mindedness about all the possibilities that the future may hold. Now, principle number 5 is one because it uses a word that's not in the dictionary. It says, make yourself anti-fragile. And what is anti-fragile? Well, anti-fragile is actually the opposite of being fragile. I mean, people think that the opposite of fragile is, robust or resilient or strong. It's not going to break. Things break when they're fragile and don't break. Well, anti-fragile is get stronger when there's volatility, when there's turbulence. Get stronger. Arrange and structure your financial life in a way to do that. Now, how do you do that? Well, it's easier said than done. But again, advice from my father is something that I would provide to you, which is expect the worst, hope for the best, and expect the worst. That's part of it. The other part of it is keep as many irons in the fire as you can, because if you have enough irons in the fire, you're first of all going to survive, and one of those irons might really catch fire, and you'll be very, very happy and very wealthy. So that's 5. And then finally, the 6th one is to just recognize that we are human. We are human, and we are emotional, irrational most of the time. Some of the time we're rational. We make cognitive errors, and we have limitations. So know your limitations, know the fact that you can't always be perfectly rational, and accommodate that. Get help when you need it, and make sure that help is on your side. So those are the 6 principles. Now, I guess I got just a few more minutes. And so what I'll do is, I guess I'll basically skip over to chapter 14, because, the first 13, 12 chapters talks all about the world of money, and gives you this trail map, so maybe a pair of binoculars, maybe a compass to tell you where you are. But, you still got to pitch a tent, and you still got to make a fire, and you still got to survive. So chapter 14 is, what should you have in your backpack? And again, I'm not telling you what to put in your backpack. I'm telling you what I have in my backpack. And what I found is categories of tools that can be very useful. And the first one is a house. You know, if you have a house, if you own a home, if you have home equity, you have an asset that is incredibly versatile. In chapter 14, I list the 7 ways I have used my home and my home equity since I bought my first condo back in, when I was 24. I've used it to take out a home equity loan to make my bills, pay my bills. I've taken out money for a down payment on a second home. I've used it for shelter for myself. I've used it for shelter for my friends and family. And there's 3 or 4 others that I've used, and there's 2 others that I haven't yet used. I haven't taken out a reverse mortgage, which I plan to supplement my retirement income when the time comes. And then there's legacy. I'm going to leave it to the future generations. So a home is something that you should have in your backpack, I think. I also think life insurance is something that you should have in your backpack. It's I call it the Swiss Army knife of financial products. I mean, life insurance and whole life insurance in particular gets a bad rap. It gets a bad reputation. But for my money, it's one of the most versatile and useful financial products that's out there. You can borrow the cash value. You can turn it into an annuity. It's a death benefit that's there if something horrible happens to you or your family, and it can be used for lots and lots of things. The last 2 tools that I talk about is what I call retirement income generators. And this is a term by my friend Steve Vernon, who's written a great book on retirement planning. And he calls them RIGs. And RIGs are things like annuities. They might even be, franchise businesses, partnerships that throw off income, but something that generates a steady, hopefully guaranteed stream of income. And then finally, the last tool that I have in my backpack is plan gifts. And that is when your financial plan goes beyond your life, and most of our plans do, because we want to leave something to our kids, our families, to charity, to somewhere. Explore plan gifts. And I don't have enough time to really talk about that now, but if you read the book, you can find out more about that one too. And I think I'm out of the 40 minutes that I was given. So I'm going to ask Jamie to come back here and open it up for questions.
Thanks so much, Peter. That was, such a practical guide to things that have most people so baffled. Our first question is from Julia, and she wants to know what inspired you to write this book. I know you kind of touched on that, but
well, okay. I'll tell you. I'll tell you the moment I knew I was going to write this book was, I was actually in Barnes and Noble, because I don't just write books. I buy books. Some people can, they can't pass a bar without stopping in for a beer. I can't pass a bookstore without stopping in and buying a book. So I spent a lot of time in bookstores, new bookstores, used bookstores, and favorite bookstores like Copperfield's in Montgomery Village. But I happened to be in a Barnes and Noble, and I was looking at the bookshelves, and this book just caught my eye, and it was called Thinking in Bets, and it was by Annie Duke, and I don't know if any of the audience knows who Annie Duke is, but I knew who she was because as an actuary, I think about cards and blackjack and poker and other games of chance and skill and combination of the two. And Annie Duke was the only woman who ever won the World Series of Poker. And so I saw that she had written this book. So I picked it up and I started looking at it and I thought, oh my goodness, she's thinking about making decisions in almost the same way I am. She's she thinks of every life decision or personal or financial decision as a bet. And it is a very helpful way of thinking about it. And at that point, I thought, wow, I mean, this is, I need to write another book, and I need to write a book about money. And I need to write a book about how an actuary thinks about money and how an actuary thinks, because a lot of what Annie had to say made tremendous amounts of sense. In fact, I mean, if you notice, the book is Annie, well, let me finish the story. So at that point, I said, I have to reach out. I have to get in contact with Annie and, talk to her about what she's written, because she and I seem to think about these things in so much the same way. And it took some doing, because she sold, her book sold quite a few more copies than my first book did. So, but I was able to get a hold of her. And once we started talking, we realized that we really both do look at the world very. And so, and it's been a wonderful collaboration. And she wrote the foreword to my book. And in fact, the section on uncertainty relies very heavily on a lot of her insights. Concepts like you don't result yourself, which is Annie's concept, which is, you make a big bet and you make the right bet, but you still lose the hand. Well, don't just assume you made a bad decision because it didn't work out. And so I believe very strongly in not resulting yourself. And she has plenty of other insights that are worth reading about. And I'm sorry, there's a truck going by here, so a little bit of extraneous noise. But in any event, so again, that was the kind of the inspiration, the thing that got me to really get going. I mean, I wanted to write this book, but it really came together after I saw her book in Barnes and Noble.
Interesting. Ibrahim is wondering, where can he find this recording? And don't worry, we'll touch on that later, but it is being recorded and it'll land in your inbox tomorrow. So kind of an interesting question is, how have your recommendations or kind of suggestions changed, when we're talking about, let's say, generation millennials, for instance, and buying a house and things that might not be as accessible to them as they would, hope. Have you seen kind of any shift in that in the past, let's say, decade or?
Absolutely. Yes. In fact, I mean, you give me an opportunity to not necessarily correct, but expand on one of the principles that I wrote. So in, principle number 3, as it's written in the book, says, make sure that the person that is working, that you're getting help from, is 100% on your side. And the way I recommend you do that is look at how they're compensated. And consequently, I was pretty down on brokers and middlemen and people who make their money on transactions. But after I had circulated an early draft to some of my fintech friends who are in this world, so young people, just like you're mentioning, Jamie, one of them came to me and said, you're wrong. You don't understand. The world has changed. You cannot avoid brokers. What you have to do is make sure that the person you're working with is honest and is trustworthy, and you do your due diligence. So, is it harder to buy a house these days? Absolutely. But it's not impossible. And I think one of the things that has happened in the last I don't know, probably 3 or 4 years is the world has gotten much more choppy and turbulent. And with turbulence comes opportunities. And so my advice to those out there, don't give up on the notion of buying some real estate, buying a home, because I think it's possible. You might have to take on debt. You might have to take on more debt than you want to do it. But in the end, I think it's the long-term right answer. So, I mean, the world has changed in lots of other ways too. And in fact, I mean, I guess I would encourage people. In fact, after the manuscript had been submitted and the book was in production, I had a bunch of time. And what I did is I wrote 6 essays, one on each of the 6 principles, kind of expanding and updating it to be more current. So, and I think all 6 of those are on medium.com. They're also on my website. And I think those essays should probably answer the reader's question.
That was extremely compelling. And for everyone, I'm sharing Peter's website here in the chat. I'll also include it in the email. But yeah, I would be definitely interested in reading those 6 essays. Yeah, that, we're kind of out of questions here, but I want to, thank you again. This has been an extremely valuable hour for me and for everyone thanking me as well. And what's next for you? I hate to say, what are you writing now, but I'd love to hear.
Here's the thing, Jamie, and now that's great. That's a great bit, because now I think we do have a few more minutes. So, because and there I can start to talk a little bit about what I'm doing, which is research, because I am an actuary, and I didn't stop being an actuary when I retired. I still consult. I'm on a board of an actuarial consulting firm, and I do research. I actually published a couple of essays on back last year around about COVID, when we were trying to figure out what was going on there. I've given up trying to figure out what's going on there. But back when some of the data was available and more easily tractable, I published an essay on that, and I think that's still on medium.com. But what I'm doing now is more research on what I think is one of the underappreciated and poorly and still suffers from a bad reputation, but it is a terrific financial product, and that is a reverse mortgage. And that is when you are over 62 and you own your own home, you can take out a reverse mortgage, or what's called a HECM, which is actually a kind of a reverse mortgage credit line, which you can then use to supplement your retirement income. And a reverse mortgage has some wonderful characteristics. I mean, the first and most important thing is that it's debt that you take on against your home equity. So it's secured by your home equity, but it's debt that you do not have to pay interest or principal until you actually die or move out of the house. So it is
Wow.
It's not exactly free money, but it is access to money that you do not have to pay back until you're gone. And not only that, but because it did have such a bad reputation, there were some pretty unsavory characters in the very early years of reverse mortgages. The government came in and they cleaned up and put in some very strict regulations and rules, and now they're, actuaries and others sort of making sure that it doesn't go south on anybody. But more than that, the government guarantees that no matter how much you owe on that reverse mortgage, you will never owe more than the house is worth. So when you die, if you die, even if the price of the house has gone in half and you owe, 50% more than than the house is worth, your heirs do not have to pay that back. They are only liable for the value of the house. So the research I'm doing with another fellow, this guy's a PhD and a tax lawyer, is on how to use reverse mortgages in the most effective way to maximize the income you're getting during retirement while minimizing the probability that you're going to run out of money before you die. And that's what I'm working on right now. So.
Well, that sounds fascinating. And I'm sure you kind of left us hanging. Everyone wants to know more. So where you said medium.com will have,
No,
any,
well,
this is new research. I might haven't.
This is there are links on my website to my research in reverse mortgages, and we, Barry Sachs and I did a kind of it was actually Barry's idea. He wrote the first paper, then Barry and I did some more research to kind of expand the concept. But we recommend a thing called a coordinated strategy of coordinating the drawdown of a reverse mortgage with withdrawals from your 401k in a not too complicated, but in a sophisticated way that will avoid some of the serious risks that you face by just drawing down your portfolio once you retire. I mean, it's a solution to a problem that is still unsolved in generally, which is the decumulation problem. How do you take a lump sum of money that you retire with and make it last for the rest of your life, when at any time you don't know how long you're going to live? And so that's the problem that Barry and I are working on. And we've got already one paper that's out there, another paper that we have results on, that we have a presentation that we're making around, and we have another one on the books. So
it's great. And I just found out that all of these essays are on your LinkedIn. So I will go ahead and link that in the email tomorrow. It's great. Thank you for letting us know that, Julia. Well, that is very, very interesting. And I appreciate you giving us a little preview into that, and good luck with the rest of that research. I want to thank you all. There were really, some good questions tonight, and thank everyone for joining us. As I mentioned, this is being recorded. You'll receive an email tomorrow with a link to the recording, details where to purchase the book, the discount code, and all of these links to Peter's website and LinkedIn and everything you need. So I hope you just watched tonight and enjoyed. And with that, Peter, I would love it if you would take us out.
Well, thank you so much, and please, if anybody doesn't know where Copperfield's in Montgomery Village is, I mean, Google it, because they're easy to find and they're a terrific store. And I as soon as my house is rebuilt in near off of Farmers Lane, off of Los Alamos, I'll be there more frequently than I am now. So,
great to hear. And hopefully we'll get you in person again real soon. So
okay.
Thank you. And everyone have a great weekend. Good night.